Welcome back, everyone. Within a moment or two, we'll be back in the main session for the afternoon. Thank you to everyone for submitting your ballots, and you've got another minute or two, but it's great that already there are numbers that are very consistent with the logins to the system. And an apology for anyone who had their video stopped by the host. We didn't realise that this would then require you to have the host permission to start your video again. So from now on, please, if you speak, please stop your own video at the end of asking a question. Another technical comment: if you can hear feedback during a meeting, please check that you are muted. There have been a couple of times when our sound output has picked up the mics of members. We will go in a moment or two to questions from reporting bodies, from the Ministry and Mission Committee, the Placements Committee, Property and Operations, Ethics Committee, Synod, Ministries and Operations and Disability Royal Commission. All that before you get a break. And then on to proposals, and then some further work from the facilitation group, and more ballots and ballot announcements. Welcome back. I hope you're refreshed, ready for the next session. Moderator.
Welcome back to everyone. Oh yes, we've got our big press club room here, still getting in action. Lights coming on. Oh, interesting. Oh, they just take a little while to warm up, and then hopefully I won't be in shadow and you'll be able to see me. Welcome back, everybody. An announcement now that the ballot is now closed. Yes, I think that's right. 1:30, that's right. So the ballot is now closed, and we will hear a bit more of that a little bit further later in the afternoon. We come now to opportunities to bring questions to reports from a variety of reporting bodies, and I'm going to invite each of those in turn. And just a reminder that the reports have been available to us for some weeks now, and we are taking them as read, so there won't be actually any presentation, rather just opening up for the possibility for questions or comments. So we move to begin with to the Ministry and Mission Committee report. It's report C1.1. And this will be, we will have Reverend Graeme Harrison, who we just said thank you to a little while ago, who is chair of the M&M, or Ministry and Mission Committee, to respond to any questions that you have. So I think we have some on notice. I'm going to pass over to Graeme now.
Thank you, Moderator. Graeme Harrison, chair of the Ministry and Mission Committee, and will be so until the end of March, in case you're wondering when I finished. So I have a question on notice from Cameron McAdam, and he says this: given this line in section 1.3 of the report, now all reporting is done with reference to how the work helps to deliver the strategic framework, and the emphasis on the whole church take-up of the strategic framework. I'm somewhat surprised that the rest of the report makes little reference to the strategic framework or what M&M is doing to strategically implement it. In brackets, although I do think it is clearer in the Elm report, also part of M&M, end of brackets. Nor in the light of the Synod's financial crisis, what specific strategic steps are being taken in response. So far this is a comment. The question is this: in light of the financial crisis and unfolding staffing changes, can M&M outline what strategic steps are being taken in response, and how the Synod is ensuring the strategic framework remains the Church's priority? So a complex question which requires understanding how the governance works within our structure at Synod, and it is the Synod Standing Committee that decides the budget each year and so makes the strategic question. The role of M&M is to advise the Synod Standing Committee about how this impacts the strategic framework, and so that is our input is part of the process. So our input is incorporated as it goes through, and then Standing Committee makes the decision about the strategic framework and how it is implemented financially. In light of the financial difficulties of last year, that is clearly being taken into account. I have confidence as chair of M&M that each of the units within the life of the Synod is taking this into consideration. So, for instance, over the last number of years, it's been the MRU that has been asking for the strategic framework so that it can organise its work according to some basis, some strategy of the church. And so they've been very excited about having a strategy that forms the basis of financial decisions and not just whether it's in the positive or the negative. So that's been very positive. The strategic framework is actually carried by all the bodies of the church, not just by M&M. And so, as rightly pointed out, Elm has been implementing it. But Elm has also pointed out that it's not just those specific positions that are reflected in, say, the strategic priorities, such as intercultural, intergenerational, new and renewing. It's not just those specific positions that relate to that take those parts on board. It's all parts of Elm, including Pilgrim, including lay education, including chaplaincy, including camping, all the different parts of the roles within the life of the Synod hold and maintain the strategic framework. M&M has been given a particular role in our terms of reference to ensure it happens, and so we do, and that's part of the basis of what we look for in reporting. We are active in our interrogating of reporting to ensure that the framework is being lived out and enacted in the life of the church. So I think that covers the answer overall. I have confidence that the budget process is holding up these strategic priorities, strategic framework, I beg your pardon. And one last thing is the process of forming a budget begins with asking the various units involved, including Elm, and Elm is very proactive in upholding the strategic framework.
Thank you, Graeme. I wonder if there are any other questions anyone would like to raise or comments. Just a note, it would be helped if we could phrase our questions in a way that they can be answered within 2 or 3 minutes or so. That would assist all of our Synod members together to have an opportunity to hear from each other across these various reports. Are there any other questions? No? Okay then, I think we might move on. Thank you, Graeme, and we'll thank everyone a little bit more properly at the end. Thanks, Graeme. We come now to a report from the Placements Committee. This is report C1.3, and we have with us Reverend David Fotheringham, who is the chair of the Placements Committee, as well as Reverend Sue Withers, who is the secretary of Placements Committee, to be available for any questions or comments that you might wish to raise for them. So welcome to David and Sue, and I'm wondering if there are any questions that we have on notice or any questions that anyone would like to raise. Does anyone have a question or a comment they would like to bring? All right, a comprehensive report. Thank you. We'll move to the next report. The next report is from the Property and Operations Committee, which is one of the subcommittees of the Standing Committee, and it's report C1.2. And we have with us the chair of the P&O, Property and Operations Committee, Reverend Stan Clarke, as well as Jim Milne, who is Secretary of the Property and Operations Committee, here available for any questions or comments that you might wish to raise. So welcome to Stan and to Jim. And I understand there is at least one question on notice.
Thank you, Moderator. Stan Clarke, Chair of the Property and Operations Committee, and I live and work on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. One question that's been submitted by Cameron McAdam, and it reads, "Thanks for the report, and I can see the complexity and diversity of work that this committee oversees. Given the report makes reference more than once excuse me, that this committee fulfills the functions of the Property Board, the section on mission assets stating that the church collectively is property rich, and Synod's current financial crisis, with the exception of Wesley Place, 130 Little Collins Street and safe buildings, I'm surprised that there is basically no report on property. As I recollect, Property Board reports previously contained information about property sales and projects. In our presbytery, we have a number of long-running projects, in some cases that have run for many, many years, and in some cases that have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and yet in these projects nothing has been sold or developed. We are under pressure as a church to encourage congregations to make available underutilised property for sale or development to benefit the whole church. How can we build levels of trust, accountability and transparency that might encourage this process? Do we as a church have the capacity to do this work? What is happening currently? What property has been sold since the last Synod meeting? What key property projects are currently underway? When did they begin? What work has been undertaken in this period? When are they expected to be completed? What are the shining lights other than Wesley Place? Moderator, I might just comment that Jim Milne is beside me. Quite apart from being the secretary of this committee and boundless resource to us, this is Jim's last Synod meeting after 18 odd years of work in the Synod. So good chance to have his face before us. Thank you for the question, Cam. And you're right, it is a very diverse place. It goes way beyond the role of the old Property Board, and the work is constantly very complex. And a 5-page report really doesn't allow us to go into any detail much about any of that work. There is details about some of the property transactions that have been going on in the Here for Good and Money for Mission project reports elsewhere in our reports. What we've endeavoured to do in this report is to give members of Synod a good insight into the range of kinds of work that's going on within this committee's terms of reference and the manner in which we engage in that work. Always the filter for this work is the Synod strategic framework. And the role of this committee within that and the governance structures of the Synod is to support that vision and ensure that the decisions of the church re property, finance, insurance, administrative services and so on are aligned with those strategic frameworks and also are done compliant with the increasingly regulated environment. Congregations, those of us in congregational land really don't see much of the work that goes on our behalf done by Synod ministries and operations. It saves us in congregations from having to get involved in work that's really beyond our capacities in many cases. The Property Board, formerly, and now the Property and Operations Committee, haven't listed out all those details about all the various kinds of property transactions. That would be impossible in the framework, and it's so diverse from an agreement to let or to re-let a property that's long been in the rental market through to major projects that can have significant risk and high costs involved and require very specialist skills. And so the protocols and the processes that have been developed inform the various decisions that have, and they have greatly improved over recent years. They are much clearer and they enable us to engage and make good property decisions more efficiently and more wisely, I believe. So I'm glad you've asked about projects beyond Wesley Place, where I currently am.
Can I just ask Stan, just in mind of any others who may have some questions as well, just wondering how you think you're going for time.
Cameron was asking around some other shining lights. I wanted to mention 3 projects, if I may.
Could we perhaps just one and maybe name a couple of others? And if there's time afterwards, we could perhaps come back.
Okay. Firstly is the development question kind of project at Coburg, where it was a long intransigent process trying to discern what to do there, various properties, various buildings, surplus to the congregation's requirements and their missional capacity. By Synod, Presbytery and congregation all coming together and working, we've come up with a very creative outcome that's now providing a very refreshed and wonderful worship space for the congregation and providing a housing project that's going to provide a lot of social housing into that space. At the core of all this, what I'd want to emphasise in all of these cases that we could talk many about is the role of the presbyteries in developing a very clear missional strategy. Because what the Synod Property Services are doing, you're asking about property, is trying to come alongside well drafted and mature missional strategy within the presbyteries and then being able to provide the property strategy to support that. So that's just a strong encouragement to presbyteries to keep working in that space. We can talk around what's happened down at Rosebud and the development of the Murray Anderson Place, a disability housing facility in Rosebud. There are lots of other projects that we could name. We haven't got time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stan. I wonder if there are any other questions or comments anyone else would like to raise. Oh, no. Okay. Well, let's move on then. Thank you, Stan, and thank you, Jim. We move now to our report from the Ethics Committee. This is report C1.8, and we have with us Reverend Claire Dorr, who is the chair of the Synod Ethics Committee, to respond to any questions or comments that you would like to raise for her, to her. So can I introduce you to Claire? So could I ask if there are any questions or comments anyone would like to raise in relation to the Ethics Committee report? Yes, you'll need to raise your hand, sorry. Okay, we may move on. I can't see any raised hands, so we may move on then to our next report, which is the Synod Ministries and Operations report. And this is reports F1 through to F3. We have available to us Reverend Dr. Mark Lawrence, who is the General Secretary, who's going to respond to any particular questions or comments that you would like to raise in relation to the Synod, Ministries and Operations reports. Can I ask if there are any questions or comments? If you could raise your hand, please. No? Okay, no raised hands there. We now come to the report from the Disability Royal Commission Response Task Group. We have with us, this is report E1, and we have with us Reverend Deacon Andy Calder, who is the chair of this task group, and he's here available to answer any questions or comments that you have in relation to this report, which included a video as well, as many of the others did. Andy, can we perhaps have you spotlighted so we can see you? And for any questions or comments, please raise your hand. Hi, Andy. No. Okay. Well, look, I think we have... Do we go back? Proposals. Okay. I think we might bring that to a close then, and I would like to thank all of you who have come in to answer questions and to offer yourself to explore together with us anything that came up in the report. So I'm going to just go with first names. Thank you to David and to Sue. Thank you to Graeme. Thank you to Jim and to Stan. Thank you to Claire, Mark and Andy.
Okay.
We move now to a couple more proposals. We will begin, well, I might just introduce, well, we're going to begin with proposal 16. Proposal 16 is in relation to the date of Synod 22, and we have with us Sue Clarkson and Mark Lawrence, who are here to bring this proposal to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Thank you, Moderator. Sue Clarkson, Chair of the Business Committee. This is really just a procedural proposal asking this Synod to set the approximate dates for the next Synod and for the Standing Committee to finesse those once more information is available about venue and those sorts of things. This proposal was distributed yesterday, and I'm happy to take any questions.
If there are any questions, could you please raise your hand? No? Then I will put the proposal to you then. It's proposal number 16 in relation to the date of Synod 22. You have the wording of the proposal in your document folders, and there will be a poll coming up in a moment. And I will ask you to respond for decision, please. A few more seconds. And the poll is closed. And we have consensus. Thank you. We now come to proposal number 14. This is in relation to a process response to potential voluntary assisted dying legislation in Tasmania. And once again, you have the wording of the proposal in your document folders, and I will pass over to Mark Lawrence, and Stan Clarke is also available as well. Thank you. General Secretary.
Thank you, Moderator. Mark Lawrence, General Secretary. I live on the land of the Bunurong people. Moderator, I'll speak to this proposal. Stan's there to join in the discussion if appropriate, but once I've made this introduction, we're open for questions and comments and so forth. So, Moderator, I remind the Synod members of the rationale that was provided for this proposal and just make 3 points to highlight. First of all, it's important for the Synod to consider a response to any voluntary assisted dying legislation that may be in place within the Synod to provide at least theological and pastoral resourcing regarding that legislation and direction to the Church's agencies that need to address voluntary assisted dying legislation that may impact on the services that they provide. Secondly, it's important to note that the Standing Committee's response to this potential legislation focuses on the process by which the Church will discern its response to any legislation that might occur in Tasmania in the event of it passing. And discernment would be about the Church's response to the actual legislation, not to voluntary assisted dying itself. And thirdly, this recommended process reflects a similar process that was resolved at the 2017 Synod meeting for consideration of the Church's response to the Victorian voluntary assisted dying legislation. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, General Secretary. I'd like to invite anyone who would like to bring a question or a comment, if you could raise your hand. And we have one from Nigel Hanscamp. Nigel, can you open up your video and bring your question? Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Nigel Hanscamp, Yarra Yarra Presbytery, Wurundjeri Country. My question is whether the Standing Committee has considered whether there would be any difficulties, any foreseen difficulties, with us as a Synod having two different responses to voluntary assisted dying in two different states within the one Synod, either issues for us as a Synod or issues for our agencies.
Can I pass to you, please, General Secretary?
Thank you, Moderator. The Standing Committee hasn't explicitly addressed that question. However, the position of the Standing Committee in bringing this proposal forward, as it is from the Synod's resolution of 2019, is that we will look at the legislation, any legislation that is in place, and then make a decision about our response to that legislation based on our theological understandings and so on. So it could come to pass that the Synod, because of its theological reflection, looking at the legislation, may have a different approach to the Tasmanian legislation than it does, or come to a different end view to the Tasmanian legislation as it does for the current Victorian legislation. We just have to see how that unfolds. And I'm sorry if that's, and I think, no, I'm not, I'm sorry. I think that's a faithful way to address this matter, because it's in keeping and consistent with the way we've addressed the Victorian legislation.
Thank you, General Secretary. I'm wondering if there are any other questions or comments that anyone would like to raise. Tom Spurling. Tom.
Tom Spurling from the Presbytery of Port Phillip East in Wurundjeri Country. Does our response to the Tasmanian legislation take into account the way that we've observed the operation and outcomes of the Victorian legislation?
I might pass to you again, Mark, for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Moderator. We don't have a response to the Tasmanian legislation because nothing has been passed yet. This proposal is, in the event of any legislation passing, to undertake a consultation process. And again, we would be looking at the legislation from Tasmania itself, and there might be some comparisons with the Victorian legislation, which may lead to a side consideration of the way that legislation has been applied. But the primary focus of this exercise would be to look at the Tasmanian legislation and then to do our theological reflection in light of that and our consultation in various parts of the church. And I just want to emphasise this proposal offers the opportunity and the request of the Synod to the Standing Committee to commence a consultation process in the event of Tasmanian voluntary assisted dying legislation being passed.
Thank you, General Secretary. I wonder if there are any other questions or comments anyone would like to raise. Then I will I can't see any further raised hands, so I will put the proposal to you. This is proposal 14. I will put it to you for decision. It is the proposal 14 in relation to a process response to potential voluntary assisted dying legislation in Tasmania. The poll will be about to open for decision. Oh, there's a raised hand. Yes, I think we'll end the poll. I can see this is from Will Pickett. Will, I'm wondering if you could open your video and unmute, and we'll hear your question or comment. Thank you, Will.
Hi, Denise. Moderator, just Will Pickett from the NT region, Presbytery of Western Victoria. Just a question, where does Congress nationally see, what are their thoughts about it, about this proposal?
Thank you, Will. I might pass across to the General Secretary again. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Congress isn't explicitly stated in this proposal the way that it wasn't explicitly stated in our Victorian proposal, and that was, and I must admit, that was after consultation with Congress Victoria back then, back in 2017. However, I'm very happy to assure the Synod that Congress will be consulted when we look at in the event of the Synod needing to look at this matter.
Are there any other questions or comments that might help us in our discernment? Then I might bring the proposal again. We'll put the proposal number 14 for decision. The proposal on a process response to potential voluntary assisted dying legislation in Tasmania for decision. And a few more moments. And the poll is now closed. Thank you. And we have consensus. Thank you. We are running a little ahead of schedule, I think. I think we have some further news to hear from our business manager. I'll pass over to Sue. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. I suggest that we return to the work of the Facilitation Group and Proposal 19.
Thank you, Sue. Well, then I think we might just simply straight away move over to Reverend Ian Ferguson, who will guide us with a continuing conversation from where we left off in relation to Proposal 19. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Moderator. Ian Ferguson, Presbytery Port Phillip West, live on Wurundjeri country. The last time I stood here, I took us through Proposal 19 in detail and the ways that we'd incorporated the feedback that we'd got from people through emails. Thank you for that. So I believe we're ready to test the mind of the meeting, Moderator. Unless there are any questions.
Well, I wonder whether we might have an opportunity, now that people have had a chance to look at the proposal since we first had it presented to us, whether there are any particular questions or comments anyone would like to raise to the proposal in its current form, the most recent, Proposal 19. I have a question from Jeffrey Grinton. Jeffrey.
Thank you, Moderator. Jeffrey Grinton from Presbytery of Yarra Yarra and Wurundjeri country. Moderator, I'm still concerned about Clause B. While I believe that everyone would want to affirm the covenant relationships that we have, it concerns me that we're stating that we're affirming those relationships because of the issue of climate change. I don't believe that that's the case. I believe that these covenant relationships are much more important and broad than climate change, and that we don't affirm them because of these groups being affected by climate change. I still think it would be helpful to note that because of our concern, to note that these groups are affected because of the potential or possibility of climate change, and that our concern arises from our covenant relationship, not as a causal relationship.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm just wondering whether I might have some response from you, Ian. Perhaps a question to you, Jeffrey, about whether you have a form of words.
We did get that form of words
okay.
from Jeffrey, the form of words that he's just repeated, and we decided to go with the original wording on the basis that that was what we discussed with the Congress representative. We made some tweaks to try and address Jeffrey's concerns, but yeah, that's where we're at with it at the moment.
I'm not sure if we're in a position to do this. I'm wondering whether we can get some kind of indication of the level of support for the kinds of concerns that Jeffrey Grinton has just raised. So this is just an indication. There are no decisions being made here, but it's to get some kind of response of your level of warmth towards the kinds of concerns that Jeffrey has raised in his point, or not. So orange indicates that you're in agreement with the suggestions that Jeffrey has made. A few more moments. A few more moments. Changing your mind. And the poll is now closed. There's quite mixed responses there. I'm wondering, Ian, whether you might be able to bring us a little bit more clarification in relation to how you see the link between the affirmation of those relationships and the as in the clause, as these groups are being significantly impacted by climate change. Is this a because of kind of statement being made with that as, whether that might assist us? I also see a raised hand from Sally Douglas, but I might ask you to respond first, Ian, if you feel you're able to.
These groups are being significantly impacted by climate change. That's what the as indicates. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we have a raised hand from Sally Douglas. Sally.
Afternoon, Moderator. Sally Douglas, Yarra Presbytery on Wurundjeri land. I just wonder if we took out the being, it might make more sense. So it's not, we're not supporting them because they are being, but we're supporting them as they are impacted by the impacts of climate. So just by taking out the being, it takes that causal link out a bit more easily.
As these groups are significantly impacted by climate change, is that Sally's suggestion?
I think that's your suggestion. If I can just read those words out, Sally, and have you confirm whether this is what you're intending, so that that final clause would say, as these groups are significantly impacted by climate change.
Yeah, so it's not causal. We're already in covenant and they are being impacted. Yeah.
Thank you, Sally. And I see another raised hand, and I think I may, perhaps we should test this first. I'm going to do the same thing as we did before. This is just for indication of your degree of warmth for the suggestion or the solution that Sally has proposed or suggested. few more moments. And the poll is now closed. There is a great deal of support for that.
Yes, I'm happy with that change, Moderator.
And Ian, you're happy with that change as well. Well, we may remove, therefore, the word being from the proposal in B, proposal 19B. The first word on the last line of proposal 19B, being, we remove that, and we would be running with that. We have a raised hand with a question or comment from Jenny Burns. Jenny.
Thank you, Moderator. Jenny Burns from Elm. I live and work on the Wurundjeri land. I thought also that we had agreed to swap clauses D and E.
Ian.
That suggestion was made, but it didn't come to us in an email, so it wasn't. No decision was made to do that. So I would suggest that we just go with the order that they're in at the moment.
I'm wondering whether we might. It's difficult to work out how to. Jenny, I'm just wondering if you could respond a little bit further to that. Are you saying that you believe that that's important, or you are simply raising our attention to that having been mentioned previously? I'm just wondering what your intention is.
The latter, Moderator, that I thought it was raised and there was a sense that it flowed better.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering whether we might test then, again, just for indication, the suggestion that we reverse the order of, no, is it D and E? D and E.
Yes.
For flow reasons. I want to test that suggestion. A few more moments. Okay. A little longer then. And the poll is now closed.
Yeah.
A very large amount of warmth towards that suggestion. So we might, Ian, I'm just wondering if you would be happy to go with that suggested change.
Yes, certainly. I think.
So clause D becomes E and clause E becomes D.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions or comments anyone would like to raise that would make a difference to being able to support this proposal or not? Okay, then I want to put the proposal to you as a whole. Just considering indication or decision, I'm going to begin by actually seeing and testing out that whether we can make a decision on this. So I put to you proposal 19 with those two changes that we have just agreed to. So in clause B, the word being right toward the end of that sentence has been deleted, and clauses D and E have been reversed, but the wording remains the same. I put to you proposal 19, climate justice action, for decision. A few seconds more. And the poll is now closed. So we have a couple, it looks like, who have responded with blue, and I wonder if one or both of those may wish to speak to assist us in our discernment. Could you please raise your hand? It's extremely helpful for us as a synod so that we know how to respond when someone has indicated blue, for you to raise our awareness of what your concerns are. So Bob Hodges. Bob.
Moderator Bob Hodges. I live on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I'm here representing the property trusts. I really want to start by affirming my strong support for the thrust of this, but I think in a couple of respects, one, we're overlooking an important aspect, and two, we're becoming too prescriptive. Firstly, I think it was Tom who raised the issue of ignoring oil in transport. And if we're going to talk about some of the ways of getting to where we want to go, then I think we have to say something about how we can reduce carbon emissions with oil in transport. Transitioning vehicles away from oil is achievable today, and yet there is no comment here about how we might support that, or indicating that the church would support that. Moderator, the second thing I'm troubled by is the paragraph I3, which calls on no support to natural gas developments. I believe that we're becoming overly prescriptive here, and this speaks more to a debate of how to rather than where.
Bob, can I just interrupt for a second? You said I3. I'm wondering whether you actually mean I4.
I'm sorry, it's I4, yes.
I4, yeah, thank you. Thank you, sorry,
Providing
continue.
financial support to new natural gas developments. And thanks, moderator. And again, I say, this is getting very much into how to. I think we need to recognise there's still an ongoing debate regarding this fuel's use as a transition step to net zero, which is what we, I think, very strongly are supporting. And that debate incorporates some technical issues, which I don't think it's appropriate for the church to take a stand on at this time. I think it's an unresolved issue, and by taking a stand, I think it potentially could be counterproductive and dilute what we're trying to achieve here. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Bob. I'm wondering if we might move across to Mark to get some feedback in relation to those two questions. Mark Cernzak. Thank you, Mark.
Sure, addressing a couple of points around the use of natural gas. So the first issue is that in terms of its ability to be a better fuel than coal, that is under dispute, and looking at the latest International Energy Agency report on methane emissions indicates that emissions from natural gas extraction, so where there's leakage of methane, the level of emissions that results is actually more than the entire emissions from power generation in the European Union. So it's quite significant, and there is therefore not a lot of benefit in natural gas extraction over coal because of those fugitive emissions that are taking place. That would be the first point. Second point would be that Australia actually produces so much natural gas. Effectively, we're supporting natural gas for export rather than for domestic use. So, which is why the proposal actually talked about a reservation for Australia's use, in which case we have more than enough gas for the transition away from gas that we would need to take place. As I mentioned earlier, our view has been because we've been slow to take enough action on climate change, this has become urgent, and we can't afford to have natural gas locked in for decades to come. I note that the UN gap analysis report just came out yesterday, and it indicates that currently the government collective commitments mean that we're only going to see a 1% drop in emissions by 2030. And they're saying we need to reach at least 45% drop. So we need to have much more substantial effort. If this isn't included in the proposal, it means the church will not be taking a position on probably what is one of the main debates going forward, which is the current government's view that we should need to lock in natural gas developments for the next few decades.
Thank you, Mark. I'm also just wondering, Ian, whether we could get some guidance from you as to the capacity of the facilitation group to bring a brand new introduced aspect to this proposal in relation to that oil for transport question.
Yeah. The facilitation group would need to draw on the expertise of those who know that field, and frankly, we've got 3 more proposals still to bring, and I don't think we would get this proposal back to the Synod if we went down that path.
That's helpful guidance for us, I think. I would like to get an indication then from you. I think we have 2 parts to this question from Bob, and I want to bring them to you separately. So the first is to get an indication from you of your level of support for Bob Hodges' suggestion to add another clause to introduce a section related to oil for transport. Having heard what we have heard, can I get an indication of your warmth or coolness towards Bob Hodges' suggestion to add an additional clause on oil for transport? A couple of seconds more. And the poll is closed. So it's relatively mixed, but much more strongly against that suggestion. So not a lot of warmth for that suggestion. I think it would be difficult at this stage to proceed with that. And the other suggestion was in relation to the specificity of clause I4 in relation to natural gas. What I'm wanting to ask here is the level of support for the suggestion that Bob has made, which I think is basically to delete that clause, if I understand correctly, Bob. The question for me is this decisive for this Synod to be able to support this overall proposal or not? Can I ask for you to please give an indication of your level of warmth for Bob Hodges' suggestion to delete that clause, I4? And the poll has now been closed. Okay, there's quite strong coolness towards that. Not very much support for that proposal. I would think we would continue with the proposal as it then currently stands, with only those prior to minor amendments here. And I would like to test this out once again to put it to you for decision. Proposal 19, climate justice action, in exactly the same form as we put it last time for decision. So the word being in clause B is removed and clauses D and E are reversed. Otherwise, no change. For decision. A few moments more. And the poll is closed. Okay, we still have a couple of blue cards. I want to put 6, no, actually 6, you're right, 6. I'm just wondering how much time we continue on. Can I just please pass to the business manager and ask, I feel we might be close. Should we continue, or do we need to stop and move on?
Moderator, our schedule is to have a short break and then to return to the work of the facilitation group. So if we're close to this, let's get this through and then we'll have a short break before moving to the next proposal of the facilitation group.
Thank you, Sue. I'm going to first ask if there are any burning issues or insights that are going to help us to move forward from anyone who may be able to offer them, particularly those, yes, those who raised a blue, responded with blue. I was going to say raised a blue card, but responded with blue. Can you please raise your hand if you can offer something to assist us with our discernment? Jeffrey Grinton.
Thank you, Moderator. Jeffrey Grinton, Presbytery of Yarra Yarra. Moderator, I'd welcome a comment perhaps from the General Secretary about our policy of not actually reaffirming policies that are already in place. It concerns me that we're reaffirming a policy because of a particular issue, and that raises all sorts of questions to me about the status of that policy or the current relationship overall.
Thank you, Jeffrey. General Secretary.
Thank you, Moderator. Jeffrey's right. It's not typical for us to reaffirm existing resolutions for the sake of doing that. However, my understanding is that we are giving context, not causal, but we are giving context to why we want to make that affirmation, particularly with an issue like climate change, which is impacting various Indigenous people in Australia and Pacific neighbours and so on. So that, I guess that's all I can say. The business of the Synod is in its own hands to determine whether or not it wants to not make this affirmation at this stage, but as I understood it, as I understand this clause, this affirmation is made in a particular context.
Thank you, General Secretary. We have three others with raised hands. I am, just before I call on you, I might make a suggestion that I am thinking that what we might do next actually would be to test out whether those who have responded with a blue, even though they're unable to support the proposal as a first option, might be prepared to accept it to allow consensus to be declared. But I see three raised hands, and I wish to call on you if you believe that there is something that is of burning significance for us as a Synod to assist us with this discernment. Rowan Pryor.
Thank you, Moderator. Rowan Pryor, Presbytery of Tasmania, on the lands of the Ledda people. I'm not sure about burning significance, but I wonder if it will help us to use the word note twice in Clause B, to note the covenanting relationship between the Uniting Church in Australia and the UICC and our relationships with our partner churches in the Pacific, and note these groups are being significantly impacted by climate change. Just the insertion of the word note twice might help us forwards. Thank you, Moderator.
An extremely quick indication response to that would be very helpful. Can you please indicate whether you feel that Rowan Pryor's suggestion is helpful for us and you wish to support it? A few more moments. And the poll is closed. Very strong warmth to that proposal. Ian, I'm wondering if you have any particular responses to that as well.
Look, I think that change of wording works. It captures the spirit of the clause, but we've consulted with the Congress on the clause, and that would be my only concern, that I would want Congress representatives to be comfortable.
And we note that there's there's a difference, very significant difference in the strength of the words note compared to affirm, which is far more positive in nature as well. I see those who had raised hands have taken them down, so I'm making an assumption that they don't wish to raise any further questions. I'm going to ask for another indication in relation to the clause B, if we were to remain with the word affirm. No, we'll test out Rowan's suggestion. I want to go back to Rowan's suggestion that we change the word affirm to note, as he had suggested. Can I please get an indication, having heard Ian Ferguson's response? 2 notes, sorry, to change the word note in 2 spots in that clause B. A minute longer, a second longer, sorry. And poll is now closed. Okay, it seems that the strength, the warmth has decreased, and there's actually a greater a level of support for leaving the original form of words. I am going to put this again to you. Proposal 19, as it stands, for decision. With those stated changes, the word being left out and clauses D and E reversed. A few moments more and the poll is closed. Okay, I'm going to put to you another question, and that is to, again, for decision. However, could you please indicate with orange with if you either wish to support the proposal as we have described, and also indicate orange if, even though you are unable to support the proposal as your first option, you would be prepared to accept it to allow consensus to be declared. And you would choose blue only if you are not prepared to accept the proposal as it stands. For decision. Sorry, the poll is closed. Okay.
Just one person.
It looks like we have 2 with blue cards. One person still with the blue card. I would like to put the proposal again, looking for agreement rather than consensus. And so what I would like you to do when you choose in the poll this time is again put proposal 19, climate justice action, exactly as we have been considering these last 2 polls. To choose orange if you support the proposal, and to also choose orange if you have responded with the blue and are unable to support the proposal, but are prepared to live with this proposal in order to allow the council to record an agreement. And you would choose blue only if you were not prepared to accept an agreement. For decision. Couple of seconds more. The poll is closed. We have agreement. We have agreement. Thank you for seeing through what is an extremely important concern for all of our synod and not straightforward by any imagination. And we have a great awareness that there are many other aspects that we may have included in this proposal, and I am grateful for your patience as we have worked through this process. I'd like to thank you as well, Ian, for guiding us through.
Thank you, Moderator.
We will now move to, I'm just trying to find my spot, a break. Is it a 5-minute break? We are going to have a 5-minute break and then come back after that break at 2:30. No, we're already 2:30. At what time? 2:40. It's an 8-minute break and we'll be returning at 2:40. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody, from that extremely short break. We had probably planned to say this a little bit later, but we have the results of the first ballot in relation to the moderator-elect, and so I would like to announce that what has come from that ballot is that a preferred candidate has become clear, and that candidate is not the word, nominee, has become clear, and that person for moderator-elect, and that person is the Reverend David Fotheringham. So we still have a process yet to go, and we will hear a little bit more about that later on this afternoon for the next phase of our ballot process for moderator-elect. But for now, I would just invite you to spend a little bit of time in quietness and in stillness. Bring to mind and to heart all three of the moderator-elect nominees and their families, as we give thanks to God for the name who is before us, David, and we hold in our hearts and our spirits both Cam and Rachel and their families, and ask for the Spirit's wisdom and guidance in our ongoing discernment, which we will continue with later on this afternoon. We pray for your Spirit's wisdom to seep into us and fill our hearts. God of love. Amen. We come back now to the facilitation group feedback and proposals, and I would like to hand over again to Reverend Ian Ferguson. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Moderator. Ian Ferguson, Port Phillip West Presbytery from Wurundjeri country. I'm presenting to you what was Proposal 7 and is now Proposal 18, protecting people on temporary visas from family violence. This proposal came to the working groups yesterday. Remember that? That was a long time ago, wasn't it? But here we are. So, yes, we received your feedback from working groups, and I'd like to give you a report on that feedback now and to see if we can then put this proposal. So, first of all, there was a very high level of support for this proposal from the working groups. Not all groups got to it, some didn't have time, but a majority of groups did, and there was a high level of support for the proposal among them. There were a number of questions and comments that I'll ask Mark Zernzak to respond to, but the changes, there's one minor change and one major change in what you've got in front of you now. There's the tweak of a word in clause 1, A1. We've changed the word capture to include, just a softening of the wording there suggested by one of the groups. And the significant change is the addition of a new clause, clause 5, A5, to pick up the concern expressed by a number of groups that those on temporary visas be assisted to access help and assistance and support. So those are the two changes from the feedback, but there were a lot of, as I say, a lot of questions and comments. One group asked whether the Minister for Home Affairs should be added into those listed, but I'm told by people who know about this more than I do that the people listed there are the correct organisational line for the information to get where it needs to go. A couple of groups were concerned about the risks survivors face, which may prevent them from reporting. And the facilitation group felt that points 1 and 4 address those concerns. There was a comment from one group about the language of survivor versus victim survivor. We've chosen to continue with the original language of the proposal using survivor rather than bringing in the language of victim. One person was concerned that appropriate vigour still be applied to refugees, and another group asked about the wider picture of border security. Does this create paths to permanent residency? And that group also wanted to see people treated with justice. Now, the things that came up from the working groups that don't directly feed into the changes in the proposal, but which people put for more questions or requests for more information, and this is what I'll get Mark to respond to. Those questions are, what are we as a church doing in this area? What action are we taking, and should we be taking to support those on the front line of this issue? What is the definition of family violence in this context? Who are those affected? What relationships are they in? There was one group that thought only temporary visa holders with permanent residence were covered by this proposal, but I'll ask Mark to explain that situation. And there was a question also about state versus federal jurisdiction on this issue. So, Moderator, if I can invite Mark to respond to those questions. Thank you.
Certainly. We'll pass over to Mark Cernzak. And just a reminder, Mark, just 2 to 3 minutes response. Thank you. If possible.
So firstly, on the issue of, I would point out to members of Synod that this proposal comes to you as part of the Synod's overall response to family violence. So it is part of it. You probably need to keep in mind there is a much broader picture of the work on family violence that the Synod is engaged with. So for example, the Culture and Safety Unit at the moment has invited congregations to participate in education around family violence, and I would certainly be encouraging congregations to take up that opportunity that has been offered. There is the ability to support the work of uniting agencies that engage with survivors of family violence through providing financial support to the work of those agencies in that space. And as the GYM team, we will continue to provide opportunities to members of congregations to participate in advocacy around these issues. So that will include things like postcard campaigns, letter writing actions, or perhaps even meetings with local MPs for those congregations particularly wishing to take up this issue and be active in this space. Moving on to the proposal itself, in terms of who is included, look, it is intended to cover anyone on a temporary visa. In discussions with the agencies that deal with people in this situation, they would see a variety of people. So they would see people on 309 and 820 partner visas, which are sponsored visas towards partnership, marriage, in other words. There would be 500 student visa holders. There are people on temporary protection visas, people on safe haven enterprise visas, and people on bridging visas A, B, C, D, and E. So it covers all those different areas, which is why we've kept it high level rather than trying to look at different aspects of those different visa types. The measures as outlined in the proposal provide the ability to argue for reforms that would benefit people in all those different situations. In terms of the state and federal jurisdiction, primarily this is an issue that is an intersection of immigration law and family law, which are federal matters, so it is a Commonwealth government primarily, but the provision of services and support services, things like housing and other support, can be provided by the state governments. So that is where the intersection with state governments also exists. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mark. I'm wondering whether we have any questions that anyone would like to raise, questions or comments further. Please raise your hand. This is in relation to the proposal number 18, protecting people on temporary visas from family violence. I might test the proposal. For decision, we will put the proposal with the changes, which are comparatively minor compared to our last proposal. With these comparatively minor changes, but it is proposal 18, protecting people on temporary visas from family violence, and for decision. A couple more seconds and the poll is closed. Okay, I can see that there is one blue card, and I'm wondering if that person could speak to assist our Synod in our discernment. And by raising your hand. Okay. I might try this again. It's difficult, as we've mentioned previously. We can't see who is responding orange or blue. We can only find that there is a certain number of each choices. And without somebody who's holding a blue card, responding blue, speaking, it's difficult for us to know what might be the issues or going on for that person in responding with the blue, ranging from a heartfelt conviction to some uncertainty through to it being a finger slip. So look, I'm going to put this again to you for decision, proposal 18, protecting violence on temporary visas from family violence, and ask you again if you could make your choice of orange or blue, and before you click on submit, just check that it is you feeling confident about the response that you have made. Couple of seconds more. And the poll is closed. And we have consensus. Thank you. Thank you. I think at this stage I need to hand over to the business manager for a short comment from Sue Clarkson.
Thank you, Moderator. We've got a few minutes and I'm hopeful that we might be able to get proposal 5 through in that time frame. So could members please get proposal 5? The appointments and placements of Placements Committee Chairperson and Property Trust members and Chairperson. And I'll ask the General Secretary to speak to this.
This is proposal number 5, appointments of Placements Committee Chairperson and Property Trust members and Chairperson by Synod 2021. And I'll pass over to Mark Lawrence, our General Secretary, to guide us through this.
Thank you, Moderator. These nominations have been submitted in time for the Synod meeting. There's not an actual election because there are enough nominations for each position. However, it's appropriate for the Synod to indicate their support for these people to hold these positions. And as is indicated in the rationale, now that David Fotheringham has been named the moderator-elect, steps will... preferred candidate, sorry, I'm ahead of myself, preferred nominee. If he is a moderator-elect at the end of this process, then steps will be taken to address that. But he is still willing to serve in this role for some time.
Thank you, General Secretary. I'm hoping that was all clear for everybody. I'm wondering whether I might first of all, any questions or comments that anyone would like to raise? Proposal 5, appointments of Placements Committee Chairperson and Property Trust members and Chairperson by Synod 2021. Okay, no questions, so I will put the proposal to you for decision. Proposal 5, for decision. A few more moments. And the poll is closed. And we have consensus. Thank you. Thank you. We now move back to... Do we? Can I please have a note from the... Yes, no. I know what we are doing now. Thank you. We now move to an introduction of the Moderator-elect Ballot 2 and Synod Standing Committee Ballot 2 and Assembly Membership Ballot. And I welcome back Rod Mummery, who is our returning officer, who will introduce and explain the process for each of these. Thank you, Rod.
Moderator, Rod Mummery, Yarra Yarra Presbytery and returning officer, and I live on the land of the Wurundjeri. This ballot, we actually have 3 in one. The first one you will see when you go in to vote is for the confirmation of moderator-elect, remembering the moderator-elect needs 66% of the vote to be elected, so there'll be one name, David's name, with yes or no against it. Below that is the preferential voting for members of the Standing Committee. The names in the drop-down have been drawn by lot, and then below that is the yes-nos for each of the categories for Assembly for majority voting. And then the one that tomorrow there will be, as a result of that, there'll be a vote for the lay beyond youthful age members will be appointing. But today it's just the majority support for each of the people who have nominated for Assembly. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Rod, for guiding us through. The ballot, we hope, will come up for us and will be available. It's on the CVent page. It is now open. Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Rod. And we've been guided through this, but just before, and it's open until 3:30. So just over a half an hour. It will close at 3:30. So any submissions or attempts to submit a ballot after that time won't be accepted. Again, let's just come to a time of quietness and prayer. God of grace, we open the ears and eyes of our hearts to you once more and ask you to pour out your Spirit, to fill us with the wisdom we need to see with your eyes, to hear with your ears, to keep our focus on the needs of your church. We pray for David and we pray for ourselves that you may give us the wisdom for our choosing and our discerning. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. We now go to afternoon tea for a break, and I will pass over to our business manager if there, or are there any other notes that need to be brought to us, Sue?
Thank you, Moderator. Nothing beyond what's being said, I don't think. Ballots will close at 3:30 and you need to be back then.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sue. We will see you back at 3:30 at your devices ready to begin.